Maya Ellison had everything money could buy, except the freedom to choose her own heart. When Savannah's most eligible heiress shocked high society by rejecting the wealthy bachelor who'd just bid $15,000 for a dance with her, she walked across that ballroom floor and chose her humble white assistant instead. But what started as one brave moment of defiance would soon spiral into a scandal that threatened to destroy everything her family had built. A mysterious envelope exchanged in shadows, a misleading video that painted lies as truth, and a vengeful suitor determined to make her pay for choosing love over status. Maya was about to learn that in the world of old money and older secrets, following your heart comes with a price that could cost her everything she holds dear. But sometimes, the most dangerous choice is also the most necessary one. If you're watching this incredible love story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know where my fellow romantics are tuning in. Maya Ellison stood in the grand hallway of her family's estate, watching sunlight stream through the tall windows onto polished hardwood floors. The afternoon light caught the crystal chandelier above, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the cream-colored walls. She smoothed her navy dress and checked her watch. In 3 hours, 200 of Savannah's most important people would fill these rooms for the Foundation's biggest fundraiser of the year. "Miss Maya, the florists are asking about the centerpieces." Evan Cole appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. His khaki pants were pressed, his white button-down crisp despite the Georgia heat. At 29, he'd been her assistant and driver for 8 months, and she still marveled at how he seemed to solve problems before she even knew they existed. "What's the issue?" Maya asked, grateful for his calm presence. The man had a way of making chaos feel manageable. "They want to know if the white roses should go in the ballroom or the dining room. The delivery got mixed up." Evan's voice carried no stress, just facts. His blue eyes met hers with that steady look she'd come to rely on. Maya felt her shoulders relax. "Ballroom. The dining room gets the peach ones." She'd only told him the flower plan once, 2 weeks ago, but somehow he remembered every detail. "Got it." He made a note on his clipboard. "Mr. Alvarez is setting up the valet area. He wants to know about the backup plan if it rains." Through the windows, Maya could see Rafael Alvarez directing 2 younger men as they arranged parking signs near the oak trees. The 60-year-old grounds chief had worked for her family since before she was born. His silver hair caught the light as he pointed toward the circular drive. "The covered portico can handle maybe 50 cars, Maya said. "After that, we'll have to use the carriage house. Already talked to him about it." Evan's pen moved across. "The paper." "He's got tarps ready just in case." Maya smiled. "Of course he does." The sound of heels clicking on marble announced her mother's arrival before Vivian Ellison appeared in the hallway. At 55, Vivian moved with the grace of someone born to these rooms. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and her emerald dress looked like it belonged in a magazine. She carried herself like the society queen she'd been for 30 years. "Maya, darling, we need to discuss tonight." Vivian's tone was warm but serious. "The board members will be watching. Several major donors are coming. This is important for the foundation." "I know, Mom." Maya had heard this speech before. "Everything's under control." Vivian's gaze shifted to Evan, who stood quietly beside the window. "Evan, the catering staff needs direction for the bar setup. Could you see to that?" "Of course, Mrs. Ellison." Evan nodded and headed toward the kitchen, leaving mother and daughter alone. Vivian waited until his footsteps faded before continuing. "I've seated you next to Lucas Harrow for dinner. He's very interested in expanding his business relationship with our foundation." Maya's stomach tightened. Lucas Harrow was 33, wealthy, and handsome in the way that made other women stare. He was also pushy, entitled, and thought every conversation should revolve around him. "Mom, I can handle my own social life. I'm not asking you to marry the man. I'm asking you to be gracious." Vivian's voice carried the steel that had guided Maya through childhood. "Appearances matter in our world. You know that." Maya did know that. She'd grown up understanding that the Ellison name came with responsibility. Her family had built their wealth through smart investments and careful partnerships. The foundation that bore their name had donated millions to education and housing projects across Georgia. People watched what Maya did, where she went, who she talked to. Sometimes it felt like living in a fishbowl. "I'll be polite," Maya promised, "but I won't pretend to be someone I'm not." Vivian's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to pretend, sweetheart. I'm asking you to think about how your choices affect the foundation. The work we do matters. The people we help are counting on us." Maya knew her mother was right. The foundation had put her through Spelman College, funded her master's degree in nonprofit management, and given her a purpose beyond just being rich. She loved the work. She loved helping families buy their first homes, sending kids to college, building community centers in neighborhoods that needed them. But sometimes she felt like she was disappearing behind the title. Maya Ellison, heiress. Maya Ellison, foundation president. Maya Ellison, eligible young woman from a good family. When did she get to just be Maya? "The first guests should arrive around 7, Vivian said, checking her own watch. "I'll be in my room getting ready." Maya nodded and walked toward the kitchen, needing to check on the catering setup. The house buzzed with activity. Staff members moved through rooms with flower arrangements and extra chairs. The air smelled like lemon polish and fresh bread. In the kitchen, she found Evan talking with the head caterer, a thin woman with graying hair who looked stressed. 3 uniformed servers stood nearby, waiting for direction. "The ice sculpture delivery is running late," the caterer was saying. "And the champagne glasses aren't the right ones. These are too small." "How late?" Evan asked calmly. Maya noticed he'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms tanned from working outside. Before becoming her assistant, he'd spent 5 years as a carpenter. His hands still showed the calluses from that work. "Maybe an hour, 2 if there's traffic." "That puts us right at guest arrival time," Evan thought for a moment. "What if we skip the ice sculpture for cocktail hour and bring it out during dinner? Give your team time to set up properly." The caterer's face brightened. "That could work. And the champagne glasses? I can call my supplier. He might have the right ones in stock." "Perfect." Evan made another note. "Maya, what do you think?" She realized he'd known she was listening. "Sounds good to me." She appreciated that he asked for her approval instead of just making decisions. Some assistants forgot who was actually in charge. The caterer hurried off to make her phone calls, and the servers dispersed to their tasks. Maya and Evan found themselves alone in the quiet kitchen. "You're good at this," Maya said. "Managing chaos, I mean." Evan shrugged. "My dad always said there's no problem that can't be broken down into smaller pieces. You just have to figure out which piece to handle first." Maya had met Evan's father once, briefly, when the older man had driven down from Atlanta to visit. James Cole was a retired electrician with work-worn hands and a gentle smile that reminded her of Evan. He'd passed away just 2 months after that visit, leaving behind a son who rarely talked about his grief, but carried it quietly in his shoulders. "He sounds like he was a wise man," Maya said softly. "Yeah, he was." Evan's voice carried a note of sadness before he straightened and checked his clipboard again. "I should go make sure the valet team knows about the rain plan." Maya watched him walk away, noting the careful way he moved through her family's house, like he belonged there but wasn't quite sure he was allowed to believe it. She'd hired him 8 months ago after her previous assistant had moved to Charleston. Evan's resume had been impressive, good references, solid work history, reliable, but it was his quiet competence that had made her keep him. He anticipated problems, solved them without drama, and never made her feel like she owed him anything for doing his job well. Plus, if she was being honest with herself, she enjoyed having him around. Evan didn't treat her like a title or a responsibility. He treated her like a person who happened to need help managing a complicated schedule. In a world where most people wanted something from her, that was refreshing. The afternoon passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. Maya changed into her evening dress, a deep burgundy gown that her mother had picked out because it photographed well. She touched up her makeup and checked her reflection in the mirror. Her dark skin glowed against the rich color of the dress. Her hair was styled in an updo that showed off the pearl earrings her grandmother had left her. She looked like an Ellison, polished, proper, ready to represent the family name. But as she walked downstairs to greet the first guests, Maya felt the familiar weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. Tonight would be about handshakes and small talk and carefully navigating conversations with donors who expected her to be grateful for their attention. It would be about smiling at the right moments and saying the right things and never letting anyone see that sometimes she felt lonely in a room full of people. The ballroom had been transformed. Soft lights hung from the ceiling like stars. The white roses Evan had directed to this room created elegant centerpieces on each table. Through the tall windows, Maya could see the last golden light of day fading into evening. Soon cars would start arriving. The night would begin. "Maya," her mother appeared beside her, looking radiant in emerald green. "You look beautiful, darling." "Thank you." Maya straightened her shoulders and prepared to become the woman everyone expected her to be. But as the first guests began to arrive, she found herself looking toward the kitchen, wondering what Evan was doing. Probably making sure the backup generators were ready in case the building storms knocked out power. Probably solving problems she didn't even know existed yet. The thought made her smile, and for a moment, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. By 7:30, the estate was alive with the sound of conversation and laughter. Maya moved through the rooms like she'd been trained to do since childhood, greeting guests with warm smiles and gracious words. She shook hands with the mayor, hugged old family friends, and accepted compliments on the beautiful decorations with perfect Southern grace. "Maya, you remember Lucas Harrow?" Her mother's voice appeared beside her as they stood near the bar in the main parlor. Maya turned to find Lucas approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. He was tall and lean, with dark hair styled perfectly and a smile that probably cost as much as most people's cars. His tuxedo fit him like it had been made specifically for his body, which it probably had been. "Of course. Hello, Lucas." Maya accepted the champagne he offered, even though she hadn't asked for one. "You look stunning tonight." Lucas's eyes swept over her dress in a way that made her uncomfortable. "That color is perfect on you." "Thank you." Maya took a small sip of champagne and looked around the room for an escape route. She spotted Tasha Reed, her 26-year-old cousin who handled public relations for the foundation. Tasha was standing near the windows, talking with 2 board members and looking elegant in a navy dress. "I've been looking forward to this evening for weeks," Lucas continued. "I had my assistant clear my entire calendar just to be here." "How thoughtful." Maya kept her voice polite but neutral. She'd learned that showing too much enthusiasm with men like Lucas was like throwing gasoline on a fire. "I was hoping we might find time to talk privately later. I have some ideas about expanding the partnership between your foundation and my investment firm." Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice like they were sharing secrets. "I think we could do some really impressive things together." Maya doubted that Lucas's idea of impressive had much to do with helping people and a lot to do with making money. "Tonight's about the foundation, not business." "Everything's business, beautiful." Lucas's smile widened. "But we can talk about whatever you want." Before Maya could respond, the lights dimmed slightly and the sound system crackled to life. The evening's program was about to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice filled the room, "please make your way to the ballroom for tonight's charity auction." Maya used the announcement as an excuse to move away from Lucas, but he followed her through the crowd toward the ballroom. Other guests streamed in the same direction, their voices creating a buzz of excitement. The charity auction was always the highlight of these events. People bid ridiculous amounts of money for vacations and art pieces, all in the name of supporting a good cause. The ballroom looked magical under the soft lighting. Round tables draped in cream-colored linens filled the space, each one topped with white roses and flickering candles. A small stage had been set up at one end of the room, with a podium and a screen for displaying auction items. Maya found herself seated at the head table with her mother, several board members, and, unfortunately, Lucas. As the appetizers were served, she made polite conversation with the elderly woman to her left, while trying to ignore Lucas's attempts to monopolize her attention. "The silent auction is doing well," Tasha reported, leaning over to whisper in Maya's ear. "We're already at $80,000 and the live auction hasn't even started." Maya felt a flutter of satisfaction. The foundation could do a lot of good with that kind of money. "That's wonderful news. Your young man is doing excellent work tonight," the elderly woman on Maya's left commented. Maya looked at her in confusion until the woman nodded toward the edge of the room, where Evan was quietly directing servers as they refilled water, glasses, and removed empty plates. So efficient. You hardly notice him, but everything runs smoothly. He's not my young man, Maya said automatically. He's my assistant. But as she watched Evan move through the room, she found herself noticing things she usually didn't pay attention to. The way he bent down to hear a server's question instead of making her speak louder. How he caught a falling napkin before the guest even noticed it had dropped. The quiet confidence in his movements as he solved small problems without drawing attention to himself. "If you say so, dear," the elderly woman said with a knowing smile. The live auction began after dinner, and Maya found herself relaxing as the auctioneer's enthusiasm filled the room. People bid enthusiastically on a week in Tuscany, a private wine tasting, and a golf package at Augusta. The energy was positive, and Maya could see the foundation's account balance growing with each successful bid. Then, the auctioneer stepped up to the microphone with a mischievous grin. "Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special item for tonight's auction, something that money truly can't buy." He paused for dramatic effect. "A dance with Savannah's most eligible and beautiful heiress, Miss Maya Ellison herself." Maya's fork froze halfway to her mouth. They were auctioning off a dance with her? She looked at her mother, who was smiling serenely as if this had been planned all along. Tasha looked surprised but pleased. Lucas was grinning like he just won the lottery. "Now, who will start the bidding for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity?" the auctioneer called out. $5,000. Lucas's voice rang out clearly, and he stood up so everyone could see who was bidding. Maya's chest tightened. She felt like a prize horse being sold to the highest bidder. Around the room, people were turning to stare at her, some with amusement, others with interest. Camera phones appeared as guests started recording the moment. "I have 5,000. Do I hear 6? 6,000. A voice from the back of the room. 7,000. Lucas countered immediately, his smile growing wider. Maya gripped her napkin under the table as the bidding continued to climb. 8,000. 9. 10. Each bid felt like another chain being wrapped around her, tying her to expectations and appearances and the never-ending performance of being Maya Ellison, perfect heiress. $15,000. Lucas's voice carried across the room with absolute confidence. The other bidder shook his head and sat down. "I have $15,000, the auctioneer announced. "Going once." Maya looked out at the sea of faces staring at her. She saw approval in some eyes, amusement in others. She saw her mother's expectant smile and Lucas's triumphant grin. She saw phones recording her moment of being sold like an object at market. Going twice, something snapped inside Maya's chest. She was 27 years old. She had 2 college degrees and ran a foundation that had donated millions of dollars to help families across the state. She was not a prize to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Maya stood up, her chair scraping against the floor in the sudden quiet. "I'll choose my own partner," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the ballroom without the microphone. The room went dead silent. Even the servers stopped moving. Maya felt every eye in the room fixed on her as she stepped away from the head table. Her heart pounded as she walked across the dance floor, her heels clicking against the polished wood. She could hear whispers starting behind her, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she walked directly to where Evan stood near the side wall, his face a picture of surprise. "Would you dance with me?" she asked quietly, her voice meant only for him. Evan looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. Around them, the whispers were getting louder. Camera phones were pointing in their direction. Maya could feel the weight of 200 people watching this moment, but all she could see was Evan's steady gaze. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "I am," Maya said, and realized she'd never been more certain of anything in her life. Evan nodded once and extended his hand. Maya took it, feeling the warmth and roughness of his palm against hers. He led her to the center of the dance floor as the band, after a moment of confusion, began playing a slow waltz. They began to move together, and Maya discovered that Evan knew how to dance, not just the basic steps, but really dance. He led her smoothly around the floor, his hand steady on her waist, his eyes never leaving her face. "Thank you," she whispered as they turned. "For what?" His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "For not making me feel like a fool." Evan's hand tightened slightly on hers. "You could never look like a fool, But are you ready for the talk that's going to come from this? Maya glanced around the room as they spun. She could see shocked faces, disapproving frowns, and excited whispers. She saw her mother sitting very still at the head table, her face carefully blank. She saw Lucas standing beside his chair, his expression dark with anger. "Let them talk," she said, and meant it. They danced in comfortable silence for another minute, moving together like they'd done this 100 times before. Maya felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. As the music came to an end, Evans spun her one final time and brought her to a gentle stop. The ballroom erupted in polite applause, but Maya barely heard it. She was looking up into Evan's face, seeing something there she hadn't noticed before. Or maybe she'd noticed it but hadn't let herself believe it was real. "Maya." Lucas's voice cut through the moment like a knife. He appeared beside them, his face tight with controlled anger. "Could I speak with you privately?" Evan immediately stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. "I should get back to work." "Thank you for the dance," Maya said formally, but her eyes said something different. Evan nodded and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Maya alone with Lucas and the weight of what she'd just done. "That was quite a show," Lucas said, his voice low and dangerous. "I hope you know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Maya replied, surprised by her own calmness. "Do you? Because from where I was standing, it looked like you just embarrassed yourself in front of everyone who matters in the city." Lucas stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "People are already talking. By tomorrow, this will be all over social media. Heiress dances with the help. Is that really the image you want for yourself? For your family's foundation?" Maya felt a flutter of doubt in her chest. Lucas was right about one thing. People would talk. They were probably already talking. By morning, this moment would be dissected and analyzed by everyone from her mother's bridge club to the society reporters who covered these events. But as she looked across the ballroom and saw Evan quietly coordinating with the catering staff to serve dessert, she realized she didn't care. "Thank you for your concern," she said to Lucas with cool politeness, "but I can handle my own image." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I was trying to help you, Maya. I thought we had something special developing between us." "We have a business relationship," Maya corrected. "Nothing more." "We could have more." Lucas's voice carried a note of desperation that surprised her. "I can offer you things, status, connections, a partnership that would benefit both our families." Maya looked at him for a long moment, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Lucas Harrow was handsome and wealthy and could probably open doors for her foundation that were currently closed. But he was also a man who thought he could buy a dance with her like a commodity. A man who saw her as a prize to be won rather than a person to be known. "I'm sure you could," she said finally, "but I'm not interested." She walked away before he could respond, heading for the French doors that led to the veranda. She needed air. She needed space. She needed a moment to figure out what she'd just done and why it felt like the first honest thing she'd said all night. The veranda was empty, except for the sound of crickets and the distant rumble of thunder. Storm clouds were gathering over the Savannah River, and the air smelled like rain. Maya stood at the railing, looking out over the gardens where she'd played as a child. "Second thoughts?" Maya turned to find Evan standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. He'd shed his professional mask again, and she could see concern in his eyes. "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "No second thoughts." Evan stepped onto the veranda, letting the door close behind him. "Your mother looked like she wanted to disappear under the table." Maya winced. "She'll get over it. She always does." "And Lucas?" "Lucas will find someone else to dance with, someone who appreciates being treated like a commodity." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the thunder getting closer. Maya realized this was the first time they'd been alone together, outside of work discussions. Usually their conversations happened in her office or the car, with agendas and schedules between them. This felt different, more real. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not making a big deal about it, for just dancing with me." "Thank you for asking." Evan's voice carried a warmth she hadn't heard before. Though I have to admit, I wasn't expecting to be part of the entertainment tonight. Maya laughed, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Neither was I. The whole auction thing was a surprise. A surprise you didn't enjoy? I felt like a prize cow, Maya admitted. Stand here, smile prettily, and go to whoever bids the most. It was humiliating. Evan was quiet for a moment, watching the storm clouds build over the river. For what it's worth, I think you handled it perfectly. That took courage. Or stupidity? I'm not sure which yet. Definitely courage. Evan turned to look at her, his expression serious. You could have just smiled and played along. Most people would have, but you stood up for yourself instead. Maya felt something warm unfold in her chest at his words. When was the last time someone had told her she was brave instead of beautiful? When had someone last seen her as a person with convictions rather than an image to be managed? The first fat raindrops began to fall, spattering against the veranda's wooden floor. Through the French doors, Maya could see guests beginning to migrate toward the exits as the weather turned. The evening was ending. I should go help with the cleanup, Evan said, but he didn't move toward the door. In a minute, Maya said. Let's just watch the storm for a minute. So they stood side by side on the veranda, watching rain begin to fall on her family's gardens while thunder rolled across the Georgia sky. And for the first time in months, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The rain started gently, just a whisper against the veranda roof, but within minutes it had become a steady drumming that made conversation impossible without raising their voices. Maya watched the water cascade off the gutters, creating small rivers in the garden paths below. The storm had arrived faster than anyone expected. The guests, Maya said suddenly, remembering the 200 people who would need to get to their cars. Evan was already moving toward the door, his hand reaching for the radio clipped to his belt. Mr. Alvarez, this is Evan. We need umbrellas at all exits, and the valet team needs to move fast. The storm's here. Maya followed him back into the ballroom, where the elegant evening was transforming into organized chaos. Guests were gathering their purses and wraps, glancing nervously at the windows as lightning flashed outside. The catering staff moved quickly to cover the outdoor bar and protect the sound equipment. Maya, there you are. Vivian appeared beside them, her face calm despite the commotion. We need to get people out safely. The weather service is calling for possible hail. Maya nodded and moved into action, her years of managing foundation events taking over. She directed traffic flow toward the main entrance where the covered portico would provide some protection. Tasha coordinated with the valet team to bring cars around quickly. The mayor's wife needed help getting to her car because of her arthritis. An elderly board member had forgotten where he'd left his umbrella. Through it all, Maya was aware of Evan moving efficiently through the crowd. He appeared with umbrellas for guests who needed them. He helped the catering staff protect expensive equipment. He radioed the security team to make sure the parking areas were safe as the storm intensified. Your assistant is a treasure, the elderly woman from dinner commented as she waited for her ride. So attentive without being pushy. You're lucky to have him. Maya glanced across the room to where Evan was helping an older gentleman with his coat. Yes, she said quietly. I am. By 10 o'clock, the last guests had been safely delivered to their cars, and the estate was quiet, except for the sound of rain against the windows. The catering staff worked to pack up their equipment while Maya, Vivian, and Tasha gathered in the parlor to debrief the evening. The silent auction raised $93,000, Tasha reported, scrolling through her tablet. The live auction brought in another $47,000. Overall, one of our most successful fundraisers ever. Wonderful news, Vivian said, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of tea. But her eyes found Maya's face. Though I suspect we'll have other things to discuss in the morning. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Her mother's tone was carefully neutral, which usually meant she was either very pleased or very upset. Given the events of the evening, Maya suspected it wasn't pleasure. If you're talking about the dance, I'm talking about the fact that by tomorrow afternoon, every society reporter in Georgia will have heard about it. Vivian's voice remained calm, but Maya could see the tension in her shoulders. Photos and videos are probably being uploaded to social media as we speak. Tasha looked up from her tablet with a grimace. Actually, they already are. Heiress dances with help is starting to trend on Instagram. Maya's heart sank. She'd known there would be talk, but she hadn't considered how quickly social media could spread the story. "How bad is it?" "Mixed reactions," Tasha said diplomatically. "Some people think it was romantic. Others—" She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. "Others think I've lost my mind," Maya finished for her. "Others think you've forgotten your place in society," Vivian corrected gently. "Which is worse." Maya felt anger flare in her chest. "My place? What exactly is my place, Mom? To smile prettily and dance with whoever bids the most money? To pretend I don't have opinions or preferences of my own?" "Your place is to protect the foundation and the family name," Vivian replied, her voice gaining steel. "Your personal feelings are secondary to those responsibilities." "That's not fair." "Fair has nothing to do with it." Vivian set down her teacup with more force than necessary. "We didn't choose to be born into this family, Maya, but we were. And that comes with obligations. People depend on the foundation's work. Donors trust us to be responsible stewards of their money. When you create drama and controversy, you put all of that at risk." Maya stared at her mother, feeling like she was 8 years old again and being scolded for tracking mud through the house. But she wasn't 8 anymore, and she was tired of being treated like her feelings didn't matter. "So I'm supposed to spend my whole life being what other people want me to be? Never making a choice that might ruffle feathers or cause gossip?" "I'm asking you to think before you act," Vivian said firmly. "Tonight was impulsive. You embarrassed Lucas, who is an important investor. You created a spectacle that overshadowed the foundation's work, and you put Evan in an impossible position." The mention of Evan's name hit Maya like a cold splash of water. She hadn't thought about how her choice might affect him. He depended on his job with her family. If the board decided his presence was causing problems, they could pressure her to let him go. "I need to check on something," Maya said abruptly, standing up. "Maya," Vivian began, "we can finish this conversation tomorrow." Maya was already heading for the door. "I need some air." She found Evan in the kitchen, working with the catering supervisor to make sure all the equipment was properly cleaned and stored. His sleeves were still rolled up, and there was a damp spot on his shirt where he'd been loading dishes. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Everything okay?" Maya realized she didn't know how to answer that question. Was everything okay? She'd publicly chosen him over the wealthiest man in the room. Her mother was furious. Social media was buzzing with speculation, and she had no idea what any of it meant or where it left them. "I wanted to make sure, I hope I didn't put you in an awkward position tonight." Evan finished drying his hands on a dish towel and turned to face her fully. "You mean by dancing with you?" "I mean by making it seem like—" Maya struggled to find the right words. "I don't want people to think you encouraged this somehow, or that you're taking advantage of your position." Something flickered across Evan's face. "Is that what you're worried about? What people might think about my motives?" "I'm worried about how this might affect you," Maya said honestly. "This job, your reputation, you don't deserve to be dragged into gossip because of something I did." Evan studied her for a long moment. The kitchen had grown quiet around them as the last of the catering staff finished their work and headed out into the rain. They were alone with the sound of water against windows and the distant rumble of thunder. "Can I ask you something?" Evan said finally. "Of course. Why did you do it, really? Why did you choose to dance with me instead of just going along with the auction?" Maya had been asking herself the same question for the past hour. She could give him the easy answer, that she'd been angry about being treated like an object, that she'd wanted to make a point about her independence. Both of those things were true. But standing in the quiet kitchen with Evan looking at her with those steady blue eyes, Maya realized there was a deeper truth she hadn't been willing to admit to herself. "Because in that moment, you were the only person in the room who felt real to me," she said quietly. "Everyone else was playing a part, saying what they thought I wanted to hear, or what would benefit them somehow. But you've never treated me like anything other than a person who happens to need help organizing her schedule." Evan's expression softened. "Is that so unusual?" "You'd be surprised." Maya leaned against the kitchen counter, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Most people want something from me. Money for their business, connections for their family, access to my mother's social circle. Even the men who ask me out seem more interested in the idea of dating an Ellison than in actually getting to know me. That sounds lonely. The simple observation hit Maya harder than she'd expected. It is, sometimes. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the storm outside. Maya found herself noticing small details about Evan that she'd never paid attention to before. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he wasn't wearing it, slicked back for work. The scar on his left hand from what looked like an old tool accident. The careful way he'd folded the dish towel and placed it on the counter. "For what it's worth," Evan said eventually, "I don't think you made a mistake tonight. That took guts. My mother thinks I've damaged the Foundation's reputation. Have you? Or have you just reminded people that you're a human being with your own mind?" Maya looked at him in surprise. "You don't think it was selfish? Putting my feelings ahead of what's best for the organization?" "I think authenticity is never selfish," Evan said firmly. "And I think people respond to leaders who are genuine more than they respond to ones who are perfect." Maya felt something warm and hopeful unfold in her chest. "You really believe that?" "I do." Evan's voice was quiet but certain. "The donors I've met at these events don't just give money because you look good in photographs. They give because they trust you to use their donations wisely. That trust comes from character, not from following every social rule perfectly." Maya stared at him, feeling like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Over the past 8 months, she'd thought of Evan as reliable, competent, and pleasant to work with, but she'd never realized how thoughtful he was, or how carefully he observed the world around him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saying that. I needed to hear it." "Maya," Evan's voice carried a note of hesitation. "Can I say something else? Please. Whatever happens tomorrow with the gossip and the media attention, I want you to know that dancing with you tonight was an honor. Not because you're an Ellison or because you run a foundation, but because you're a woman who stands up for what she believes in. That's worth more than all the social approval in the world." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time someone had complimented her character instead of her appearance? When had someone last made her feel valued for who she was rather than what she represented? "I should let you finish up here," she said, suddenly aware that they were standing closer than was strictly professional. "It's late." "Right." Evan stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. "I'll make sure everything's locked up before I leave." "Thank you." Maya hesitated at the kitchen door. "Evan, are we okay? After tonight, I mean? I don't want things to be weird between us." Evan's smile was gentle and genuine. "We're okay, Maya. Nothing has to change if you don't want it to." But as Maya walked back through the quiet house toward her room, she realized that everything had already changed. She just wasn't sure what she was going to do about it yet. Upstairs in her bedroom, Maya changed out of her burgundy gown and into comfortable pajamas. She sat at her vanity and removed her jewelry, thinking about the evening's events. The fundraiser had been a financial success. The foundation would be able to help more families because of the money raised tonight. But Maya couldn't stop thinking about the moment when she'd walked across that dance floor. The feeling of making a choice that was entirely her own, regardless of what anyone else thought. The look in Evan's eyes when she'd asked him to dance. The surprising comfort of moving in his arms like they belonged together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "FYI, the trending hashtag is mostly positive now. People are calling it romantic. Sweet dreams, cousin." Maya smiled despite herself. Maybe the world wouldn't end because she'd chosen to follow her heart for once. Maybe authenticity really was worth more than perfection. Thunder rolled across the sky one more time, and then the storm began to move on toward the coast. Maya fell asleep, listening to the gentle sound of rain on her bedroom windows, and for the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous night's storm had washed the world clean. Maya woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the sound of birds singing in the oak trees outside. For a moment, she felt peaceful and rested. Then she remembered the events of the previous evening, and her stomach clenched with anxiety. She dressed quickly in jeans and a cotton sweater, then made her way downstairs to the kitchen. She could smell coffee brewing and hear voices coming from the breakfast nook. Her mother and Tasha were sitting at the small round table, laptops and newspapers spread between them. "Good morning," Maya said cautiously, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the pot on the counter. "Morning, sweetie." Tasha looked up with a sympathetic smile. "How did you sleep?" "Better than expected." Maya joined them at the table and immediately saw what they'd been looking at. Tasha's laptop screen showed several social media posts with photos from the previous evening. The newspapers had headlines like, "Foundation Heiress makes unexpected choice at charity gala." "How bad is it?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Actually, it's not bad at all," Tasha said, turning the laptop so Maya could see it better. "Look at these comments. So romantic. Good for her. Finally, someone who follows her heart instead of her trust fund." Maya scrolled through the posts, surprised by the positive responses. There were negative comments too, of course, people calling her choice inappropriate or attention-seeking, but they seemed to be outnumbered by supporters who found the story charming. "The board chair called this morning," Vivian said quietly. Maya's stomach dropped until her mother continued. "3 major donors have already called him to increase their contributions. Apparently they were impressed by your independence." Maya stared at her mother. "Really?" "Really." Vivian's expression was still serious, but some of the tension had left her shoulders. "It seems that people respond well to authenticity, as someone pointed out to me yesterday evening." Maya caught the reference to her conversation with Evan and felt warmth spread through her chest. "So the foundation isn't ruined?" "Hardly," Tasha grinned. "If anything, this story is bringing positive attention to our work. People are sharing information about the foundation along with the photos. We've gotten more website traffic this morning than we usually see in a month." Maya felt a huge weight lift from her shoulders. She'd been prepared to face consequences for her choice, but she hadn't expected it to actually help the organization she cared so much about. "There is one small problem," Vivian said, her tone becoming more serious. "Lucas called this morning. He's not pleased about how the evening ended." "What did he say?" "He feels that you embarrassed him publicly. He's threatening to pull his investment firm's support from the foundation unless you issue some kind of public apology." Maya's good mood evaporated. "An apology for what? For not being auctioned off to him like a prize?" "For creating what he calls a public spectacle," Vivian said carefully. "He seems to think you orchestrated the whole thing as some kind of publicity stunt." "That's ridiculous." Maya felt anger rising in her chest. "I didn't even know about the dance auction until it was announced." "I know that," Vivian said gently. "But Lucas is angry, and angry men with money can cause problems for non-profit organizations." Maya stared at her coffee cup, processing this information. Lucas's investment firm had donated $200,000 to the foundation over the past 3 years. That was a significant amount of money, enough to fund several scholarship programs or help dozens of families with down payments on their first homes. But the thought of apologizing for choosing her own dance partner made her feel sick. "What if I talk to him?" Maya said finally. "Not to apologize, but to explain. Maybe I can make him understand that this wasn't about him." "Maya," Tasha's voice was gentle but firm, "you don't owe that man an explanation. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that. But if talking to him saves the foundation $200,000 in donations, then it's worth a conversation." Vivian nodded slowly. "That's very mature of you, sweetheart. But be careful. Lucas is used to getting his way. Don't let him manipulate you into feeling guilty for standing up for yourself." Maya nodded and pulled out her phone to text Lucas, asking if they could meet for coffee later in the day. His response came back within minutes. "Fine, my office, 2 p.m. The terse reply made Maya's stomach clench, but she confirmed the meeting. She'd deal with Lucas's wounded ego if it meant protecting the foundation's work. "I should go check on Evan," Maya said, standing up from the table. "Make sure he's not dealing with any fallout from last night." Tasha and Vivian exchanged a look that Maya pretended not to see. She found Evan in the estate's office, working at his desk with quiet efficiency. Sunday was technically his day off, but he often came in to catch up on administrative tasks when the house was quiet. He looked up when she knocked on the open door, his face brightening with a genuine smile. Good morning. How are you feeling? Better than I expected, Maya said, settling into the chair across from his desk. The social media reaction has been mostly positive, and apparently some donors want to increase their contributions because of last night. That's wonderful news. Evan's relief was evident. I was worried that your choice might have negative consequences for the foundation. There might be one negative consequence, Maya admitted, and told him about Lucas's threat to pull his firm's support. Evan's expression darkened. He's trying to punish you for not choosing him. Probably. But $200,000 is a lot of money for the foundation to lose over my personal decisions. Maya, Evan's voice was firm. You can't let him hold the foundation hostage because his feelings were hurt. That's not fair to you, and it's not healthy for the organization. I'm just going to talk to him, try to smooth things over. Evan looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded slowly. Just be careful. Men like Lucas don't handle rejection well. He might try to make you feel guilty or convince you that you made a mistake. Maya appreciated his concern, but she felt confident she could handle Lucas Harrow. She'd been dealing with entitled men her entire life. I'll be fine, she assured him. What about you? Any problems from last night? A few curious looks from the catering staff this morning, but nothing serious. Evan's smile returned. Though Mr. Alvarez did mention that he's never seen anyone handle a crisis as gracefully as you did during the storm. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. He said that? He said you have your grandmother's backbone and your father's heart. High praise from Rafael Alvarez. Maya had loved her grandmother dearly, and her father had been her hero before his death 5 years earlier. To be compared to both of them felt like the highest compliment she could receive. I should let you get back to work, she said, standing up. I have a meeting with Lucas this afternoon. Maya, Evan's voice stopped her at the door. Whatever he says to you, remember that you don't owe him anything. You made an honest choice last night. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of that. Maya nodded, feeling grateful for his support. But as she left the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that her conversation with Lucas was going to be more difficult than she had anticipated. At 2 o'clock sharp, Maya walked into the sleek downtown offices of Harrow Investments. The building was all glass and steel, designed to impress clients with its modern elegance. Lucas's assistant, a thin young woman with nervous eyes, led Maya to a conference room overlooking the Savannah River. Lucas was waiting for her, sitting at the head of a long table like he was conducting a board meeting rather than having a personal conversation. He'd traded his tuxedo for an expensive suit, but his expression was just as cold as it had been when she'd walked away from him the night before. Maya, thank you for coming. His voice was polite but distant. Of course. Maya took a seat across from him, keeping her own tone neutral. I wanted to clear the air about last night. Yes, let's talk about last night. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. I've been thinking about your performance, trying to understand what you were hoping to accomplish. The word performance made Maya's jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. I wasn't trying to accomplish anything except making my own choice about who I wanted to dance with. Come on, Maya, you're smarter than that. Lucas's smile was condescending. You knew exactly what kind of statement you were making, rejecting the successful businessman in favor of the hired help. It was calculated to get attention. It wasn't calculated at all, Maya said firmly. It was an honest reaction to feeling like I was being auctioned off against my will. Auctioned off? Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was a charity fundraiser, Maya, a chance for successful men to support your foundation while enjoying your company. That's how these things work. Maya stared at him, seeing clearly now what Evan had warned her about. Lucas truly believed that his money entitled him to her attention, her company, her compliance. The idea that she might have her own preferences or feelings didn't seem to occur to him. I understand that you're upset, Maya said carefully, but I hope we can separate your personal feelings from your support of the foundation's work. The organization helps a lot of people who have nothing to do with what happened between us. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. Lucas's tone became more businesslike, which somehow made it more threatening. My firm has been a major supporter of your foundation for 3 years. We've donated over $200,000 to various programs. And we're grateful for that support. Good. Then you'll understand why I'm concerned about the Foundation's image and leadership. Lucas leaned forward, his eyes intense. What happened last night reflects poorly on your judgment, Maya. My clients are conservative people. They don't want their donations associated with drama. Maya felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that if you want my firm's continued support, you need to make things right. A public apology would be a good start, something that acknowledges your poor judgment and reassures donors that the Foundation is in stable hands. An apology for what? Maya's voice was getting harder to control. For choosing my own dance partner? For not accepting that I was a prize to be won? An apology for creating unnecessary controversy, Lucas said smoothly. For putting your personal whims ahead of your professional responsibilities. Maya stared at him across the polished conference table, seeing him clearly for the first time. This wasn't about the Foundation's image or donor concerns. This was about a man who couldn't accept being told no. A man who thought his wealth gave him the right to control her choices. No, she said quietly. Excuse me. No, I won't apologize. Maya stood up, her decision crystallizing with each word. What I did last night wasn't wrong. I chose to dance with someone who treats me like a human being instead of a possession. If that offends you, then maybe your money isn't worth what it costs to accept it. Lucas's face darkened. You're making a serious mistake, Maya. My firm isn't the only donor who feels this way. You could lose a lot of support over this. Then I guess I'll have to find new donors, ones who care more about the Foundation's work than about controlling my personal life. Maya turned and walked toward the door, her heart pounding, but her steps steady. You'll regret this, Lucas called after her. You're throwing away everything your family built for what? An infatuation with the help? Maya turned back to face him, her eyes blazing. I'm protecting everything my family built. My grandfather started this foundation to help people who needed a chance. My parents grew it because they believed everyone deserved dignity and respect. What I did last night honored those values. What you're asking me to do would betray them. She walked out of the conference room without looking back, leaving Lucas Harrow and his threats behind. In the elevator down to the lobby, Maya's hands shook slightly as the adrenaline of confrontation began to wear off. She'd just potentially cost the Foundation $200,000. The board would need to be informed. Alternative funding would need to be found. Her mother would be concerned. But as the elevator doors opened and Maya stepped out into the sunny afternoon, she realized she felt lighter than she had in months. She'd stood up for herself and her values. She'd refused to be bullied or manipulated. And for the first time in her life, she'd chosen authenticity over approval. She pulled out her phone and called Tasha as she walked to her car. How did it go? Her cousin asked immediately. He wanted me to publicly apologize for my poor judgment, Maya said. I told him no. Good for you. What did he say to that? He pulled his firm's support and implied other donors might do the same. Tasha was quiet for a moment. Are you okay with that? Maya thought about the question as she started her car. Was she okay with potentially losing a significant donor? Was she okay with the possibility that other supporters might follow Lucas's lead? Yeah, she said, surprising herself with how certain she sounded. I am. We'll find other donors, better ones. I'll start making calls this week, Tasha promised. We'll replace that money within 6 months. Maya smiled as she drove home through the quiet Sunday streets of Savannah. She was lucky to have family who supported her choices even when they came with risks. But as she turned into the estate's long driveway, Maya found herself thinking less about donors and more about the man who'd told her that authenticity was never selfish. The man who danced with her like she was precious instead of purchasable. The man she was beginning to realize meant more to her than she'd ever allowed herself to admit. 1934. Monday morning arrived with the kind of golden light that made Savannah look like a painting. Maya woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks, despite the weight of her decision to cut ties with Lucas's investment firm. She'd spent Sunday evening explaining the situation to her mother, who had listened with surprising calm before nodding and saying, "Sometimes principles are worth more than money." Maya dressed in a simple blue dress and made her way downstairs, looking forward to getting back to the Foundation's regular work. The weekend's drama had been exhausting, but now she could focus on what really mattered, helping families and strengthening communities. She found Evan in the kitchen, coordinating with the new catering delivery for a small luncheon they were hosting later in the week. He looked up when she entered, his face brightening with a smile that made her stomach flutter in a way she was beginning to recognize. "Good morning. How are you feeling after yesterday's meeting?" Maya poured herself coffee from the pot on the counter. "Relieved, actually. Lucas showed his true colors, and now I don't have to pretend to respect him anymore." That must have been a difficult conversation. "It was easier than I expected." Maya leaned against the counter, enjoying the quiet moment before the day's meetings began. Once I realized what he was really asking for, saying no was simple. Evan finished making notes on his clipboard and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you worried about the foundation losing funding? I know that donation was significant." Maya appreciated that he was thinking about the practical implications of her choice. It showed how much he cared about the organization's work, not just her personal feelings. "A little," she admitted, "but Tasha is confident we can replace that funding with donors who actually care about our mission, instead of wanting to control our leadership. And honestly, I feel better knowing our supporters believe in what we're doing." "That makes sense." Evan hesitated, then added, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I'm proud of you for standing up to him. That took real courage." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." They stood looking at each other for a moment longer than was strictly professional. Maya found herself noticing details she'd somehow missed before, the way Evan's eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, the careful way he always made sure she had everything she needed before thinking about his own comfort. "I should review today's schedule," Maya said. Finally, though she didn't really want to break the moment. "Right." Evan's professional mask slipped back into place, but not before she caught a flash of something deeper in his expression. "You have the board call at 10, lunch with the education committee at 12:30, and the site visit to the new community center at 3. "Perfect." Maya paused at the kitchen door. "Evan, would you like to join me for the site visit? I know you've been following the construction progress, and I'd value your input." "I'd like that," he said, and his smile was genuine and warm. As Maya walked to her office, she realized she was looking forward to spending time with Evan outside the usual routine of meetings and phone calls. She wanted to see how he interacted with the construction crew, hear his thoughts on the project, watch him in a setting where his natural competence could shine. The morning passed quickly with routine foundation business. The board call went smoothly. Several members had actually seen positive news coverage about Saturday's fundraiser and were pleased with the attention it had brought to their work. Maya decided not to mention Lucas's threats unless the funding situation became critical. During lunch with the education committee, Maya found herself distracted by thoughts of her upcoming site visit with Evan. She kept catching herself glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes until 3 o'clock. "Maya, you seem happy today," commented Dr. Sarah Chen, the committee chairwoman. "That fundraiser on Saturday must have been a real success." "It was," Maya agreed, thinking less about the money raised and more about the moment she'd chosen authenticity over expectation. Sometimes taking a risk pays off in ways you don't anticipate. At 3 o'clock sharp, Evan met Maya in the estate's circular driveway with her car keys in his hand. But instead of moving toward the driver's side as usual, he held them out to her. "Feel like driving yourself today?" he asked. "The construction site isn't far, and it might be nice for you to have that control." Maya looked at him in surprise. In 8 months of working together, he had always driven when they went to appointments together. It was part of his job description. But something about his offer felt significant, like he was recognizing her as an equal rather than someone who needed to be taken care of. "Actually, yes, I would like that." She took the keys, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. "But I'd still like you to come along, as my colleague, not my driver." Evan's smile was worth the small gesture of independence. "I'd be honored." The community center was located in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but Maya could see signs of renewal everywhere she looked. Fresh paint on several houses, new playground equipment in the small park, young families walking with strollers on sidewalks that had recently been repaired. The Foundation's investment in this area was beginning to show results. The community center itself was almost finished, a modern building designed to blend with the historic neighborhood around it. Large windows would let in plenty of natural light, and the front entrance opened onto a welcoming plaza where residents could gather. "Maya, good to see you." Tom Rodriguez, the construction foreman, approached them with a hard hat in each hand. Right on schedule for the October opening. Maya accepted the yellow hard hat he offered and settled it over her hair. "The building looks amazing, Tom. Walk us through the progress?" For the next hour, Tom led them through every room of the nearly completed center. There would be classrooms for adult education programs, a computer lab for job training, a commercial kitchen for cooking classes and community meals, and a large multi-purpose room for meetings and events. Maya found herself watching Evan as they toured the facility. He asked thoughtful questions about accessibility features and safety protocols. He noticed that one of the classroom windows didn't open properly and pointed it out to Tom. When they visited the kitchen, he suggested adjustments to the storage layout that would make the space more efficient for large groups. "You know a lot about construction," Maya observed as they stood in the multi-purpose room, looking out at the neighborhood through floor-to-ceiling windows. "5 years of carpentry work teaches you to notice details," Evan replied. "This is good work, though. Tom's crew knows what they're doing." "What do you think about the space? Does it feel right for what we're trying to accomplish?" Evan was quiet for a moment, his eyes taking in the room's proportions and the way afternoon light filled the space. "It feels hopeful," he said finally, "like it was designed by people who actually care about the families who'll use it." Maya felt a flutter of pride. The community center had been her pet project for 2 years, and she'd insisted on involving neighborhood residents in every design decision. Hearing Evan recognize that care in the finished building meant more to her than any architectural award. "The families helped design it," she told him. "We held meetings in the park every month for a year, asking people what they needed, what would make their lives better. Then we found architects willing to listen to those ideas." "That's brilliant." Evan turned to look at her with genuine admiration. "Most nonprofits build what they think communities need, instead of asking what people actually want." "That's exactly what I was trying to avoid." Maya felt herself relaxing into the conversation, enjoying Evan's perspective on her work. "There's no point in spending all this money on a building that sits empty because it doesn't serve real needs." They walked out to the plaza together, where benches had been arranged around a small fountain that wasn't running yet. The late afternoon sun painted the new brick in warm, golden light. "Thank you for bringing me today," Evan said as they stood looking back at the building. "It's easy to get caught up in schedules and logistics and forget what all the work is really about. Seeing this reminds me why the foundation matters." Maya felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition that she'd been waiting for this conversation without realizing it. "What do you think it's about?" "The work, I mean." Evan considered the question seriously. "I think it's about giving people chances they wouldn't have otherwise. The chance to learn new skills, start businesses, buy homes, send their kids to college, basic dignity and opportunity." "Yes," Maya's voice was soft with emotion. "That's exactly what it's about." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a group of children play in the park across the street. Maya realized this was the longest personal conversation she'd ever had with Evan, and she didn't want it to end. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Always. What made you want to work for the foundation? I know you could have stayed in construction or found a corporate job that paid more. Why this?" Evan was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if she'd overstepped some boundary, but when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. "My dad grew up in a neighborhood like this one," he said finally. "Poor family, not much opportunity. When he was 16, a non-profit organization gave him a scholarship to a trade school. That scholarship changed his entire life. He met my mom at that school, learned the skills that let him start his own business, built a good life for our family." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. "He wanted to give back." "He always said he owed everything to people who were willing to invest in potential rather than just proven success." Evan's eyes were distant with memory. "When I saw the job posting for this position, I thought about him. Figured maybe I could help other people get the same kind of chance he got." Maya stared at him, feeling like she was seeing him completely for the first time. She'd hired him because he was competent and reliable. She'd kept him because he made her life easier and her work more efficient. But she'd never understood that he was driven by the same passion for helping others that motivated her own work. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "Your father would be proud of what you're doing here." Evan's smile was tinged with sadness. "I hope so. He died before I started this job, so I never got to tell him about it." Without thinking, Maya reached out and touched his arm gently. "He knows," she said with quiet certainty. "Fathers always know when their children are doing good work." Evan looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up at her face. Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of connection that went deeper than professional respect. "Maya," he said quietly, "can I tell you something?" "Yes. Working with you this past year has been the best job I've ever had, not just because the work matters, but because you make it easy to do good work. You listen to people, you make thoughtful decisions, you care about getting things right more than getting credit for them." Maya felt her cheeks warm. "That's very kind of you to say." "I'm not being kind. I'm being honest." Evan's voice was serious now. "What happened Saturday night? Choosing your own dance partner instead of just going along with what people expected, that took real courage. It made me proud to work for someone who lives her values instead of just talking about them." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd spent so much energy over the past few days worrying about whether she'd made the right choice, whether she'd damaged the foundation's reputation or hurt the work they were trying to do. But standing here with Evan, seeing her decision reflected back through his eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd done the right thing. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for supporting my choice, for understanding what it meant to me." "Always," Evan said, and the word carried weight beyond its simple sound. They walked back to the car in comfortable silence, both of them processing the shift that had occurred between them. Maya felt like she'd crossed some invisible line, moved from seeing Evan as an employee to recognizing him as something much more significant. As they drove back toward the estate, Maya found herself stealing glances at Evan's profile. The strong line of his jaw, the careful way he watched the road even when he wasn't driving, the unconscious grace in his movements. When had she started noticing these details? When had his presence become something she looked forward to, rather than simply expected? "Maya," Evan said as they turned into the estate's long driveway, "would you like to have coffee tomorrow morning? I mean, before work starts, somewhere away from the office." Maya's heart jumped. "Like a meeting?" Evan paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Like two people who enjoy each other's company, having coffee together?" Maya pulled the car to a stop in front of the main house and turned to look at him directly. His blue eyes were serious but hopeful, waiting for her response without pressure. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. Evan's smile transformed his entire face. "There's a small place by the river. Quiet, good coffee, tables outside where we can watch the water." "Perfect." Maya felt excitement flutter in her stomach. "What time?" 8:30, if that's not too early." 8:30 is perfect." They sat looking at each other for a moment longer, both of them aware that something important had just been agreed to. Not just coffee, but the acknowledgement that there was something between them worth exploring. "I should let you get back to your evening," Evan said finally, though he made no move to get out of the car. "Right." Maya's voice was breathless. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." "See you tomorrow?" Maya watched from her bedroom window an hour later as Evan's truck disappeared down the driveway. Her heart was still racing with the possibility of what tomorrow morning might bring. For the first time in her adult life, she was going on a date with someone who knew her as a person before seeing her as an heiress, someone who valued her character over her connections, someone who might actually be falling for Maya instead of the Ellison name. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. But as Maya got ready for bed, she realized she was more excited than afraid. Tomorrow morning couldn't come fast enough.